You're listening to international investment advisor Doug Goldstein on the Goldstein on Gelt show, the financial show where we'll talk about how you can make the most of your money. With all the confusing financial chatter bombarding you each and every day, Goldstein on Gelt will give you the practical information you want and need about living a financially stable life. Here's your host, money maven Doug Goldstein.
Okay, we are back. We are talking to Bob Arno. Bob was called by Time magazine the world's foremost expert on the techniques of first-rank wires. And for those of you who are not in the field, wires is the slang term for pickpockets. Bob, it's a pleasure to have you.
Hello there. Thank you very much for the introduction.
Bob's a fabulous, not only entertainer, but he teaches people, including the police, about pickpocketing. So I'd like to understand a little bit more what the world of pickpocketing is today.
Well, it certainly has many, many different levels of sophistication because it has to do with where you are. And at the lowest, shall we say, level, the sort of the punks that simply take an opportunity, maybe rip a cell phone, an iPhone straight out of your hand. There's no skill involved, but it still is classified as pickpocketing. And at the next level, it could be someone who simply steals your purse or your bag in a hotel lobby or maybe in a coffee shop. But then the ones that we are fascinated about, the ones that intrigue me and the one that we study are the teamwork, where you might have 3 or 4 people in a group and they target the individual, and they do that in a very clever way, maybe over the internet, finding out precisely what shows you're going to, how wealthy you might be, what kind of cars you drive, where the banking is done, and the hit is done in a sophisticated way.
So how can we protect ourselves?
Well, when it comes to the low end, it's extremely easy. You simply have to have a line of sight to your belongings. And by that I mean that your eyes have to be at all times on your handbag, or the important thing, the iPad in your hand when you sit in a coffee shop in Paris. If you're in a coffee area, you can't sort of turn around and ask for another refill and expect in a crowded coffee place that your iPad is going to remain there. So depending on where you are, your antennas have to be up. And so giving the opportunity to a low-end guy, there's no skill factor on them. It's simply that you weren't cautious yourself. The next level, which could be public transportation, for example, in London, in Paris, in Rome, you're in a crowded metro station and you get squeezed from both sides. If you don't understand the tricks of the trade and how they spring it on you, you simply have to be doing what the locals are doing. Maybe keep your hand on the wallet when it's really crowded, or alternatively, buy yourself one of those cheap little travel pouches that you can secure to the belt and hang on the inside of your pants. Now, there are many alternatives of this. It can be in a strap around your neck, but of course worn inside. So that is easy to protect yourself if you read up in advance about the destination. I don't want to poop on travel in general. What I do want to say is that there are some cities, some destination where you have more of a threat factor than others, and it's those areas where you have to be particularly cautious.
Does that make people, let me just ask on that one, does that mean that you really have to walk around being paranoid all the time?
That's the part that I hope that people do not have to be. When you are in places like Rio de Janeiro, Johannesburg, Moscow, Naples in Italy, you certainly have to be on guard 24 hours because you stand out as a sore thumb in those places. They recognize you for what you are, which is possibly an ignorant tourist or a shop tourist. But regardless of the level of your own awareness, you are a tourist in their home territory, and therefore you are a constant, shall we say, a threat is there. So in those places, yes. In other places, most of the place of London, for example, Copenhagen or Helsinki, you certainly don't have to walk around and be cautious all the time. If you practice a few common, obvious, shall we say, careful things, then have fun with the travel experience.
Okay, so now tell me more about the upper level
Well, the upper level where you become a target is where you may wear expensive jewelry, let's say a gold Rolex Presidente. That telegraphs to, your wife may have a very expensive bag or fine shoes or whatever. It sets off right away that you are a wealthy couple. In the areas where they target you, which could be, for example, in Rome or Barcelona, might be a perfect example, they are going to follow you, maybe for 20 minutes. So if you are flashing significant money, if you are at an ATM and taking out some serious money, or you are coming out of an expensive hotel, and you have a very fine, smooth handbag that your wife is carrying, it has a very thin strap, it's very likely that 20 minutes later, they'll come and simply yank it straight off your shoulder. So in those places, you have to be a little more cautious. Lock the expensive stuff in the hotel room. Don't wear it sort of in a flashy way.
Okay, we are talking to Bob Arno, who is an expert not only in pickpocketing, which is for those of you who may have seen him on TV as an entertainer who shows people how easy it is to be pickpocketed, and it's fascinating. And at the end, I'll ask Bob how we can learn more, although you can just look him up on YouTube and you'll find some great videos. But Bob does a lot more than that. He talks to people about personal safety, and I want to discuss that in terms of this show, which is really a financial planning show. The clients that I deal with in my day job as a financial advisor often don't want to get their statements mailed to them because they say that makes them a target. And they actually find that getting their statements over email is better because in a lot of, really not so much in Israel, but my company has clients in South America. And those clients say, if you mail me a statement, then anyone will pull it out of my post box and he'll see that I have $1 million account, and then I'm going to be kidnapped.
Yep. There's no question of that if you are in those places, if you live in Mexico City, even Argentina, for example, express kidnapping, there are lots of places around the world where you simply have to behave very different than if you live, for example, in Reading in the United Kingdom, 2 hours outside London, a little middle-class town that has no threat whatsoever. So the territory where you live is what signals and tells you how cautious you are. The same thing if you visit, for example, South Africa, for example, on a safari. Most people think that, it's all fun with the game parks, and that's absolutely true. But the wealthy people who live there are on a 24-hour, very careful how they drive. Do they stop at the red light or not? They're concerned about carjacking, and they're concerned about whether there is an intrusion into your internet system, where they bypass the password you have, or they have found it out by placing a cookie into your system, or alternatively through your snail mail. So all of those things where the bad guys can read you, you need to pay attention to.
And how often does something like this happen? Going back to my question before, should we be paranoid that someone is constantly breaking into our life?
Well, it's my feeling that the statistics is easy to obtain, and it's either the police itself will know and you will read a little bit about your area, or, for example, your friends will tell you. The minute you see the statistics popping up, you're going to have to start paying serious attention, because the bad guys are very good at finding precisely the weakest link. They are looking for those who are not protecting their computers properly, or they have an open website somehow, or, for example, they drop a flash drive, for example, on the floor, and you open it, you take it and you open it up, and it says information about the statistics of salaries for the coming year for a company. And you say, well, that's appealing, that's interesting. It could be in a coffee shop where you work. What you don't know is that the bad guy has planted that in order to plant a cookie that opens up the back door to your computer, and then they read some of the information. There are so many intriguing ways that they get into the computer. So you're going to have really good, sophisticated software that will protect you from the latest viruses, and certainly double authentication devices if you are talking about your bank accounts or your investment accounts. And double authentication basically means that you have your account number, you have your password, but you also have a small electronic device that the financial institution will send to you, and it generates an additional password that is used for 60 seconds, and then it generates a new one. So with that little device, you improve your security enormously. But as I said, it depends on the territory where you are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It reminds me what you're saying about when the Iranian nuclear plant was struck with a virus, and they said, how could that have hit us? Because we're not connected to the internet. We have no connection to the outside world. And the story that they say, and who knows if it's really true, is that one of the professors who worked there had gotten like a disc-on key like you were describing and put it into his laptop at home, and then he brought that laptop to work. And once he plugged it into the system, which was completely cut off from the rest of the world, it then was infected.
Well, it's said, of course, that the let me retract that. A good hacker, and there is probably, when I say a good, maybe we're talking about 50 people in the world that are truly, truly sophisticated. Half of those guys, even the bad ones, are hired by Microsoft and the other corporations without anyone really knowing it, to hang around the bad guys, to find out the latest virus and the latest development, and then sort of pass on the new code. But they do what's called penetration testing, which basically means that they are hired by large corporations to go to satellite offices and attempt to break in. And part of the break-in involves social engineering as much as it does code break-in. So social engineering is basically where they pretend to be a worker of some sort or a friend of the president. It could be out at the golf course, or they get they hire some clothes that resembles. They can even copy the pass the plastic key in which there is a code that you hold up against the key. They have a wire, like a copper wire, about 10 inches in diameter, that is they carry inside their clothes, and it reads the other information from the real pass key, and then they make a new key based on that with photos of themselves. But it's very intricate, and they paid significant money to do this penetration testing. And of course, what the corporations want to see is that their satellite offices, whether it is in Shanghai or in Singapore, that they are fairly safe. But where it becomes interesting is where occasionally these penetration testing hackers are also working for the U.S. government, adding an additional little key to get in backdoor.
Boy, this sounds like a real James Bond.
Nobody is is going to tell you precisely whether it has or whether it's not. But if you have friends in this community, you get additional little rumors, and to prove them is what is very difficult.
Okay, we have been talking to Bob Arno. Bob is well known on TV and in the entertainment circuit for his teaching and demonstrating how the world of pickpocketing works. But he's also been talking to us today about how people have to protect their assets, not just from someone walking up and grabbing a wallet, but from getting actually stolen directly from their own accounts. Bob, I'm real sorry, but we're just about out of time. But can you tell us in the last few seconds, how can people learn more about the work that you're doing?
Well, there are three ways you can find out. You certainly can go on YouTube and simply put in the two names here, Bob and Arno, and then you get a lot of fun kind of tapes or videos or shows around the world that we have done. Or you can go to our website, which is simply www.bobarno.com. Or you can go to our security site, where we basically talk about all of the different scams around the world, not just pickpocketing, but various con games. And that is called WW Thief Hunters with plural, in other words, with S at the end, hunters.com. And we have a significant amount of material there that is both in an anecdotal fun form, but also certainly teaching people how to protect themselves.
Fabulous. Okay, Bob Arno, thank you so much for joining us.
Great. That was fun. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt show.